And let me remind everyone, the purpose of this hearing is to dissect the policies of the Biden-Harris administration. And if there's an opportunity and some want to defend those policies, this is a perfect forum to do that. So again, I look forward to a very substantive hearing, and I'll begin with questions. I recognize myself. Mr. Krikorian, you mentioned what I think is one of the biggest failures in policy of any administration, and that's what the disaster at the southern border. And I know that Vice President Harris has kind of flip-flopped. She even has 4 years ago, she implied that the border wall was racist, and now she's featuring it in campaign ads. One of the first policies enacted was the halting the construction of the border wall. You have stated in your remarks that you believe that was their policy, to have an open border policy. It wasn't incompetence, this was their specific intent. One of the arguments that some of my colleagues make is that there was a bill that would have fixed the border crisis. Now, would that bill have solved the border crisis? I guess it was the one that the Oklahoma senator and whomever was in the Senate. That was a Senate bill. Would that have solved the crisis?
Yeah, that was Senator Langford's bill, and no, it would not have solved the crisis. H.R. 2, which this body passed, would have been much more effective in that regard. What the Senate so-called bipartisan bill, first of all, was drafted by the Biden-Harris DHS, basically, and it was a joint effort of a Democrat, a Republican, and an independent, and I have every reason to believe they were actually trying to craft something constructive, but neither they nor their staff have the depth of knowledge on immigration, and so they ended up getting basically.
So it would not have solved the problem.
No, it would not have solved the border. It would have codified some of the illegal actions they've taken.
Exactly. Commissioner Carr, you've openly criticized the Biden administration's very expensive $42 million BEAD program. Who's primarily to blame for this program's lack of meaningful follow-through, and what are the causes of these? Where we spent all this money for broadband access, and I know my district desperately needs that, but no one's getting broadband. No one's benefiting from this. What's going on with that? What's this administration done with that?
Yeah, I think
$42 billion.
The reason why we're having $42 billion allocated, 1,039 days in, not a single person connected, is because the administration under Vice President Harris's leadership has prioritized a progressive wish list of issues. They want to put DEI requirements in place. They want to put price controls in place. They want government-run networks. So it has taken time to put those requirements in place, and that has delayed the actual turning of dirt.
That's so bad. It's such a huge issue in Kentucky. And Congress allocated $42 billion, yet no one has benefited from this. That's what the purpose of this committee is about: waste, fraud, abuse, and mismanagement of the federal government. If someone on the other side wants to defend this BEAD program, I'm anxious when they get their 5 minutes. Ms. Mobbs, I believe the Chinese Communist Party is the biggest threat we have to the United States. Do you believe the Biden-Harris administration is still approaching the Chinese Communist Party as a competitor instead of an adversary, and how has their approach contributed to the CCP's increased infiltration and influence operations, such as flying a spy balloon over our country, buying up land close to U.S. military bases, and increased aggression towards Taiwan?
So I do feel that we are approaching it as competition versus looking at them as an adversary, which I said in my opening statement. It's critical for us to develop policies to effectively begin to deter and counter them as an adversary. Unfortunately, we've had weak deterrence in the Indo-Pacific. The U.S. naval fleet in the Pacific is crucial for countering China's growing military presence. We have the lowest number of ships since the Cold War, and that rapid naval expansion poses a significant threat. And the Biden administration has unfortunately been slow to increase military investments in that region. We've also failed to mitigate Chinese economic dominance via maintaining tariffs or failing to do so from economic sanctions. We've had an inadequate response to cyber threats, and we've missed opportunities for strategic diplomacy that could help us establish a winning strategy with our counterparts. So in essence, we are failing to win in this strategy. We are looking at managing the competition versus dominating.
Right, very good. We talked about the border crisis. We've talked about misappropriating $42 billion in taxpayer dollars. We published a report last week where $200 billion was lost to fraud during COVID in the unemployment insurance program. We talked about the lack of seriousness and the soft on China policies of this administration. Lastly, I want to ask about the Green New Deal, because when Vice President Harris was campaigning for president, she was an advocate of the Green New Deal. Ms. Gunasakura, what would happen? What would our energy grid look like? What would America look like if Vice President Harris was able to implement the Green New Deal?
Well, we have a snapshot of what that would look like because under the leadership of President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, the agencies have been largely implementing pieces of the Green New Deal. And so the resulting effect is increased cost energy and a less reliable grid, and also no real tangible benefit to show in terms of reducing overall emissions. So it's quite counterintuitive to the purported and stated goals of the Green New Deal to improve the environment. What you've actually seen is that you've had electricity prices go up. Most recently, home heating oil is up 36%, electricity is up 32%, and natural gas is up 25%. This is all a direct result of policies coming from agencies run by the Biden-Harris officials, agencies enacting regulations that put the squeeze on these operations, inject politics, and manifest itself in increased prices on the American people, expanding financial burdens.
So, and I'm going to give the ranking member an extra minute and a half. So is it safe to say the Kamala Harris Green New Deal would contribute as much to increased inflation as the Democrats' Inflation Reduction Act has?
Well, yeah, certainly, and I know you recall, she was the tie-breaking vote that passed the Inflation Reduction Act. But yeah, the Green New Deal, when energy prices go up, the price of everything else goes up, and when you're in the inflationary economy, everyone's dealing with it, makes it that much worse.
Thank you. I now yield 6.5 to the ranking member.